Clinically, fibromyalgia is a diagnosis given to people that have generalized joint pain or stiffness or even some fatigue and low energy. Understandably, there's a lot of frustration with the fibromyalgia diagnosis, partly because it seems to come out of nowhere and there's really not much of a quote-unquote cure to it. Clinically, it's seen as something that you have to manage throughout your life. Well, I'm going to introduce you to a new perspective of fibromyalgia from the knowledge of the 5 biological laws and GNM. We talk about the different symptoms as originating from an unexpected conflict shock that affects the brain and that creates physiological changes in our bodies, in fibromyalgia's case, in the muscles of the bodies. And we also talked about the fact that there's 2 phases to every single one of these biological programs. The moment we have a conflict shock, we enter the conflict active phase. The moment we resolve that conflict shock, we enter the healing phase. Now, most of the symptoms we get, such as joint pain and stiffness and fatigue, are actually in the healing phase. So for those that are suffering from fibromyalgia, that's actually a hanging healing. That's a healing phase symptom. For you to get diagnosed with the joint pain, the generalized pain, achiness, stiffness, and fatigue, you must have resolved a conflict, or you started to resolve a conflict. And the conflict theme tied to generalized muscle aches, pains, and soreness is a self-devaluation conflict. A self-devaluation conflict, feeling like you're not worthy, you're worthless, you're not good enough, you're not supported, you're not smart enough, you're a bad worker, a bad brother, a bad father, a generalized devaluation. So this means that if you are watching this right now and you're dealing with fibromyalgia symptoms, prior to those symptoms showing up, prior to your joint pain, muscle pain, fatigue, there was an unexpected stress in your life that made you feel devalued, whether it was a work issue, a relationship issue, a family issue. And one of the ways that we're going to be able to sort of deal or overcome these fibromyalgia symptoms is, again, applying those ABCs of symptom relief. The first step, A, is awareness that there's a self-devaluation conflict tied to these symptoms. What was going on in my life that made me feel devalued at that time? Perhaps not right now. If you were diagnosed with fibromyalgia a year ago, what was going on just prior to that diagnosis that made you feel devalued? B, you've got to break away from the diagnosis of fibromyalgia and break away from that thinking that, you're never going to recover, this is something for life, and start changing the way you're approaching that, and recognize that this has to do with a conflict that I was dealing with that's probably now over. If not, how do I overcome it? And so you've got to break away from the name of the diagnosis in order to be able to really deal with the symptoms. And the other thing is, now the C is, how do you change your perspective over the symptoms? Part of the issue with fibromyalgia is that the aches and pains and the discomfort and the low energy make us devalue ourselves further. So how do you start to look at that differently and be a little kinder to yourself? Give yourself the time to heal. Recognize that you dealt with a very difficult relationship, a very difficult and toxic work environment for 6 months or a year or 2 years. And this is the recovery period that your body needs to overcome that. I hope that those of you suffering from the diagnosis of fibromyalgia and the pains of fibromyalgia are able to apply these ABCs to recognize what it was that you were dealing with, become a little kinder to yourself, and allow your body the time and the opportunity to heal and close this biological program.